Tarde a todas, todos e todes.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. We are going to start with some information for those watching us on Zoom. Here below, we have a little circle for us to choose the translation channel. We also have a joint transmission in Terra de Direitos YouTube, Justiça Global, and Marielle Franco Institute. Well, I'm Daniele Duarte. I'm part of Justiça Global, a non-governmental organization in Brazil, which acts on the promotion and protection of human rights and the strengthening of civil society and democracy. I'd like to welcome everyone to this event, to this dialogue, which is a side event of the 46th session of the Human Rights Council. It is organized by Terra de Direitos, by Marielle Franco Institute, and by Justiça Global. I'd like to thank the presence of defenders. There's a little sound coming out. Sorry, guys. I'd like to thank the presence of the public defenders, Michelle Sanchez, Roseli, and the special rapporteur from the United Nations regarding the situation of human rights defenders, Mary Lawlor, the regional director of UN Women. I'd like to thank as well the regional office of women of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights and the situation of women human rights in Americas. And I'd like to thank Andrea as well for the efforts to help us and support us to construct this event and this space. From this, I'd like to highlight the importance of creating this space as well as occupying this space to denounce many situations of violations. This space also strengthens the articulation of people and organizations and mechanisms. This articulation, constructed jointly, has the potential of boosting this debate that is very important, as well as act on the promotion of human rights, especially for those who work with this daily. Unfortunately, one of the reasons that made us came to this point is because women human rights defenders are daily being attacked because they're denouncing spaces and structures that are patriarchal, racist, and LGBT phobic. There are also members of parliament who are trans, who have on their agenda stuff related to human rights. Unfortunately, as well, society has been naturalizing their suffering, and this violence, which is political, seeks to silence and eliminate bodies, especially Black bodies. Yesterday, we've completed 3 years of no response to the killing of Marielle Franco. According to the data republished by the special rapporteur in 2019, 281 human rights defenders were killed, including a lot of women. It's a greater attack. There's no greater attack on civil society than the killing of human rights defenders. It is also important to highlight that the publishing of information that denounces this grave case is important to face these violations. And it is also important to highlight that it is fundamental in this fight. Women human rights defenders, especially Black and LGBT defenders, they've been questioning daily in order to construct a better society for everyone. I'd like to ask Eshu, the Minister of Communication, for us to construct a great dialogue. And thank you so much. I'm going to pass the floor to.
Muito obrigado. Buenos días, buenas tardes a
Good
todos.
morning, good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you so much for the invitation from ONU Mujeres. We are very honored to be here today with my friend Alma Pedes. She's our leader. And from our regional office, we are always supporting those initiatives and also to support the defenders of those human rights. I would like to salute Elida, Roselia, Nieli, Jessica, those women that defend human rights that we are here to listen today, because the most important thing is to listen to them so that we can work together. And also to the special rapporteur on the situation of women defenders, that's Mary Lawlor. And also to the all organizations, Tierra de Derechos, Justicia Global, and the Marielle Franco Institute, and Andrea Bolaños for her work, and to open these spaces so that we can hear our voices. I would I would like to say that this is so important today because it's the 65th period of decisions in the commission of the Judicial Commission for women, and the main subject today in the participation of women on the decisions on the public life and also on the elimination of violence. And exactly that's why you, the women, the defenders, are the protagonists of the transformations in the social participation and in the community. And that's why every day we are facing those struggles on women's public lives. But we do have challenges. On the last report from the rapporteur of the UN, it shows us that the threats and murders against defenders of the human rights of those reporters still are going on, and we know that they are getting worse because of the reduction of the measure of protections because of the pandemic, COVID pandemic. That's why I would like to open a few ideas, key ideas, so that we can understand the defenders of those human rights and the people that defend human rights. And I would like to say something important, how we need to recognize the contribution of the defenders and the building of peace, justice, and equality. And at the same time, the challenges, the risks, the prejudice, and the endemic violence that those defenders are facing to do their jobs. All the defenders, they transform stereotypes towards the gender equality inside our organizations, building with their supports and their actions. They are trying to strengthen democracy and the state of rights and the development and peace. They are facing barriers and risks when they are trying to lead. And many of those problems have to do with the stereotypes, the gender stereotype that are still present in our societies and that favor stigmatization when women are trying to work. Before the pandemic, the safety of those defenders was already a problem. For those defenders, the crisis is worse because of the risks, and then they generate additional impact. And the mental health and emotional health, we have seen that they are so affected with every woman because they have to work and they do not get paid because they suffer violence, and it has to do a lot of with violence in their communities. The processes are also another problem, and because we have the digital gaps, and this is a problem on the rural areas, and that affects the indigenous women and black women and disabled women. And that's why we have to support in the name of the defenders. We need to protect them so that they can take care of their lives and their leaderships. We need to do greater efforts and with public policies to create a better environment for them to work, especially on the territorial level. And we need political will and resources to do that, to keep their voices, the voices of those defenders. What do we have to do in the first place to protect their life, the life of those women, and try to support the strengthening strategies so that they can participate in a better way, centered in a collective dimension that recognizes the diversity of those defenders, because we are not the same. We have different categories. Us women have different categories. So we have to have different strategies on that fight against impunity and on the crimes against women. This is key that we do that. And we have to understand the differences between women. We need we need to prevent the stigmatization and discrimination. We have to convey the message that violence against women is unjustifiable everywhere. And finally, put women and their organizations in the center. At UN Women, we recognize their alliances, their networks, and that's why we develop a lot of initiatives in Latin America and also answered to uh, the General Secretariat callings to the Resolution 1325. Through our offices, with the support of the UN Women is really trying to work hard on the normatives to really help on the work of those defenders. In Colombia, we have the initiative Pro Defenders that has the focus to prevent and protect a better environment for them to work. And also we support the network between those defenders. And in Brazil, also with the support of the UN, we have the project Connecting Women and Defending Rights that strengthens the initiatives of those defenders and their abilities and their communications with a better focus to work. But everyone should do more. The change is coming. We have to work quickly and we have to support women and feminists with the focus to broaden their action networks. They are the ones who are going to work for a better future. That's why from UN Women, we are here supporting the commitment to help those defenders and women's rights and women's movements in Latin America. And we really want to do this in this moment of crisis. And we do want to have a better world. And we want to establish this world of equality to eliminate violence against women and discriminations. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to listen to this inspiring event. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, María Noel.
Thank you so much, Maria Noel, for your words. Really, they are very inspiring for us. We feel really supported, not only by UN Women, but also by you and your regional office, and also by the rapporteur that's really here with us right now. And now we are going to start the first part of questions. I would like to thank you. I would like to thank Terra de Direitos, Justiça Global, and the Marielle Franco Institute, and also for the invite that they sent me to moderate this event, and also the defenders that are here with us and their organizations, because they would want to be here, willing to participate. Thank you so much. So the first block of questions, we are going to have three sections during the event. The first one is going to be a brief presentation of the contexts of violence that women are suffering, the defenders are suffering, and they are breaking grounds and trying to defend their rights or collective rights. And the second block of questions, we are going to have a space of proposals and between the defenders and the rapporteur to talk about prevention measures of those violences. Like Maria Noel said, like she highlighted, we have an intersectional focus and the diversity of the defenders that we have in our continent. And the third one is going to be an exchange with the public, with the defenders, with the rapporteur, so that we can be able to think of future steps and the strategies that we have to develop in the future. And we are going also to have a Q&A moment. So in this part, we are going to have Pedro Vera from the regional offices for the Americas of the High Commissioner of Human Rights. And so now I'm going to pass the floor to the defenders that are here with us today. I'm going to present them right now. Sonia Acabal. She's a feminist. She's from Nonviolence Network, the REDNOVI from Guatemala. And then we have Roseli Finsky, Indigenous Regional Council of Cauca. She's from the University of Cauca, and she's a human rights defender, and she's a coordinator of the Regional Indigenous Committee at Cauca. Also from Brazil, we have Aniele Franco. She's a human rights defender. She's the director of the Marielle Franco Institute and her sister. And last but not least, we have Jessica Sanchez. She's a feminist, a lawyer, human rights lawyer, also from Oaxaca Consortium. It's also an organization from Mexico that defends the human rights. Jessica not only develops her work as a human rights defender at Oaxaca, but also in the Mesoamerican region. And also we have Mary Lawlor. She is the rapporteur, the United Nations rapporteur for the situation of human rights defenders. She's from Irish. She's a teacher at the Innovation Center at the University of Dublin, Trinity College of Dublin, and she's been working with the situation of people, of human rights defenders. She's also the director of the Office of the International Amnesty. So right now I'm going to pass the floor to our participants so that we can have this talk about what does it mean? How do you represent violence against women when we are breaking grounds on the public spaces, defending our rights? Sonia, the floor is yours. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be able to talk to you right now and feel embraced and hugged from Guatemala. There are a lot of ways or expressions that women human rights defenders live here in Guatemala when we defy power and we want to exercise mainly our right to participate and to be able to play our part on our political roles when we lead those organizations and when we are behind them. And when there's no man that is supporting us or that is working for us, in the case of Guatemala, we had serious problems because we ask ourselves, first people ask, who are you? Who represents you? And everyone, they take your words, they understand your words. So the violence that we live here in this system is also a part of those violences that we live every day. The defenders are not exempt from those violences, and this is getting worse when we are human rights defenders, because on this patriarchal world, we have to create mechanisms that when we want to transform and we want to utilize them to give some kind of integral hold protection for women, that's not ready to be used. That's when the system doesn't work. So we defenders have created laws, policies, and mechanisms from which we believe that is a space to promote them as political tools. But when we defy that power, because those mechanisms, we have many employees that right now we they have people with individual criteria. They are fundamentalists. They go against women's rights, anti-rights movements, and we know that we have a problem of judicializing, so we are not able to move forward with those processes. Yesterday, Guatemala, we had a problem when they are political pursuing those women. And now we have also an administrative persecution. So when we women, we want to take the floor and we want to whistle blow everything that's going on, we have other ways to criminalize it. We also defy the power when we decide, for instance, in Guatemala, to create a national coordinator to prevent violence against women, and they have the three powers of state, and we have all the organizations of women, and that's where the system doesn't work. That's where the mechanisms don't work, and that's why now we are trying to defy power when we are defending those mechanisms. For instance, the presidential secretariat for women. And what are we doing? We have many different uh, processes for women who do not have access to have a fair trial. We don't even have access to a lawyer. We have different crimes like uh, natural rights. We have many different problems, and they say that we are promoting false rights and also many different kinds of complaints that we are having from our colleagues. So we have different attacks against our family. We have a censorship against our participation. They say we are creating public disorder, and also the campaigns, the defamation campaigns that it's on the front. They are killing us. The net centers and people that are criminalizing us. They are taking away the possibility for us to keep defending those human rights. And in the case of Guatemala, we are at a difficult situations like our other sisters around the world. That's why I'm going to stop here because we don't have more time. But thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tonya. And so let's move on with Aniel Franco. Aniel, the floor is yours.
Olá, boa tarde.
Hello, good afternoon to everyone. I'm Aniele. I'm Executive Director of the Marielle Franco Institute and Marielle's sister. It is very good to be in the presence of Mary and her colleagues and all the invited people here today from Latin America. Yesterday, March 14th, was the day that marked 3 years of Marielle and Anderson's killing. And we are here to highlight the dynamics of violations of human rights defenders, especially those acting in the Brazilian situation are exposed to these risks. So it is very important to us for us to have a joint articulation with other organizations, movements, and international bodies of the region in an attempt to qualify the discussion and also racialize the discussion of political violence in Brazil, including the rights of Black women, which their desires to Maria Franco Institute started to develop regarding the impacts of political violence in the bodies of Black women. There are many types of manifestations during 2020 in Brazil. Black women are daily attacked here, humiliated, persecuted, just because they're putting themselves as an acting body in the politics. During the elections of 2020, we from the Institute, we've managed to show that 100% of the candidates in 2020, they suffered at least one or more than one type of violence, and 60% of women were insulted, offended, humiliated also due to their political action during the elections. What we will observe is that violence is a very efficient intimidating to, in- to halt the debate on this theme in defense of the majority interest. This violence with these women occurred before and after the election period, and there are many human rights violations that we will only stop if we have a state articulated action through pressure and denouncement in international bodies. This action must understand its complexity and understand the characteristics of Black trans women. So to finish, I'd like to say that after we've done this research, who protect Black human rights defenders in Brazil, in organizations, who ensures their security so that they may execute their work with dignity. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Aniel, for sharing your experience and the violence in the context of Brazilian women. Jessica, the floor is yours. Thank you so much. Hello, good morning. It is an honor to be with so many different important women here today. And I would like to talk about a few items from Mexico and to say that unfortunately the murders and feminicides against defenders, they have a common denominator, which is the impunity. Mexico has 20 years old of impunity, and we have the case of the Betty Cariño case and Rocio Messino's case. We have many great women that they wanted to defy the political sphere. And Mexico right now is going through a, a, a different political situation. And we have documented in different platforms the few results that we have to really cohibit those attacks, the defamations, everything that they are suffering about this observance of what we women do in our private lives. This is not questioned from men. When women decide to be a candidate, to be a municipal authority, or just to be a human rights defender, or just to be a defender, it seems like they are going to take that leap. This is a transgression against sexism. And that's why they start to question us on our private lives and on the public lives. They are trying to let us down because of the way we dress, because of the kind of partners we have. So we have a lot of different barriers that the patriarchy imposed to us. We believe that it's urgent on the regional level and here in Mexico to have a zero tolerance against women's violence against women, because they are facing violence because they are indigenous, because they are poor, because they are Black, and this is getting worse. And the difference on the different contexts in the community is important. Is important to understand, because we understand that this is going to inhibit the public action in favor of women. And we believe that it's really important that when people start investigating those murders against women, they're not stigmatized as passionate crimes. This is a tendency not only in Mexico, but also in the region, to stigmatize as crimes of passion. And we really want to we want the state to help us, and we want to have a strong body so that the defenders they can work together. We need to have a protection mechanism. We do believe that the effective protection mechanism is the network that we create. Thank you. Thank you so much. And now we are going to keep working about this. We can see this violence against women when we are transgressing the public spaces. We have that patriarchy context. And now we are going to move on one with Roseli from Colombia. The floor is yours. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm talking from Colombia of Indigenous CRIC. We have this program, one of the organizations that is celebrating 50 years old of existence, and we are working towards defending those rights and those territories. We are also a part of the national network of women as defenders, and we are working together to move on recognizing that we are women. And this is also very important since people we do not recognize ourselves as human rights defenders and territory rights. And that's hard to work with if we don't know who we are and if we do not recognize ourselves. How are we going to work together as women? That's something else that we have to work here. And also, there's a non-acknowledgement. People are not aware of the existence and the non-protection, and also the non-support of what we work when we are at risk. And also, many people here talked about the same stuff. Like here in Colombia, we have a huge number of murders of women, and this is really hard to work with. And I'm in Cauca. It is one of the cities with the greatest um, number of murders of the defenders of human rights. And 76% of those murders are of women. And the most affected ones are the women that are indigenous. And that means a very delicate subject for indigenous women because in this exclusion context and race bias context, we need to be leaders. And this is a huge work for us. It takes a lot of investments. And the murder of a defender is a feminicide, like the murder of Joselena Toconas, that still we do not have any kind of outcome. It's still in the open, and we have it's still going through impunity, and they think that we already have an agreement, a peace agreement that's signed, but we do not have the implementation of that agreement because we have a problem with the armed groups and we have the disattention of the state, which is huge. And so we need a political will. It needs to happen so that we can have a uh, better budget for us to work also. What we say here is that if us women, if we recognize ourselves, if we work together, we can be other players to help build that peace, to help achieve our plans, our development plans. We need to work together as women against the non-protection of the state, and that has a special effect on indigenous women because we need to have a whole vision of the picture because we are killing a culture, we are killing our people. And it happens a lot with young women that is now beginning to work with those leadership contexts. And of course, we are going through a lot of risks. We are being menaced by all the armed groups that are disputing those territories, and we are having our rights denied. They just see us as a sexual object, and they do not see us as a defender of those rights, as a subject of rights, because this is what's going on here in Cauca in Colombia. We are not being recognized. We are not being validated. And when we want to fight towards that, we are getting attacked by many different media, educational media, the disinformation, the fake news from the government, and this transcends all the minds and the political culture in our societies. So for us, it is really important that we can see with this look, yes, intersectional, but it needs to be more integrated and territorialized with the knowledge of those diversities, because I am a woman, I am young, I am indigenous, I am from a territory, but we want to be seen from that integrality, the territorial integrality, so that we can have uh, different measures and special measures that also need to be taken place here. We don't want to be just indigenous women. We also want to be indigenous women to have guarantees as a woman. So this is what we are trying to do right now in our context, because we have a lot of hopes in the agreements, especially to debate the structure also as women, and that is also risk to the indigenous people. But we have a lot of hope that the rural development, we can have a bigger implementation, because in order also to have a better protection for us indigenous women. Entonces, so this is a situation that we are facing right now. It's very delicate. Thank you. Thank you so much, Roseli, for this call for integrality, not only intersectionality, but also the integrality as a mission, and also for the indigenous people. And also your claim for the territory. We have to talk, to say that violence against women, defenders, and indigenous, it could be in a context of genocide, and also that need of being validated as indigenous women to develop protection measures to prevent violence. I would like to pass the floor to the special rapporteur to any kind of complementary comments, if you would like to say something about. So Mary, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, everybody, for having me here. I just want to correct something in the introduction. I am not, I used to be director of Amnesty International in Ireland, and then I left to set up Frontline Defenders to focus absolutely and completely on human rights defenders. And I retired from that in 2016. I'm now in the business school in working on business and human rights. So a few points that keep coming up. Clearly, it's when I set my mandate priorities, I wanted to look at the most vulnerable, the people defending rights who were least connected and who were often very remote and not even connected with national or bodies or regional bodies or international bodies. So clearly women human rights defenders and LGBTI human rights defenders are very vulnerable. Clearly indigenous land and environmental human rights defenders are very vulnerable. And clearly those working in very remote areas and the specific and particular risks that women who are also Black human rights defenders face are very pronounced. And so that all forms part of my priorities for the mandate. So I just wanted to tell you that to start with. And clearly for women human rights defenders, when you're up against well, women all over the world, to be honest, they are targeted not only for who they are, but for what they do. And it's the same everywhere. In some countries, it's different or worse, not worse, but different. Different contexts, different tax, but the thing that is the overarching and defining characteristic, as you well know, is that they are women. And when you add in context of patriarchy and fundamentalism and heteronormativity and militarism, the risk is really grave. And I recognize that in the report I presented last week to the Council about the growing need of and a growing acceptance that protection of women human rights defenders needs to be gender specific. But you know, you've all said about working together, local solidarity, local networks. To be honest, that is the best protection that you can develop. I always remember Hina Gilani, who was the first special representative on human rights defenders, the first UN one, and she said that what made her more secure was that it was her networks. Her networks protected her. And I think that you will find with women everywhere, it's the networks they develop that most protect them. To be honest, there's no point in thinking the UN can do it. The UN is a huge, big bureaucratic body. It's unlike what I am used to. It's very procedurally defined. And the way that I can act is to take up cases with governments. And I do that through the formal procedure called communication. Building alliances, I think, is really important. You know, mapping out your environment as you clearly do. But you know, when you're talking about strengthening your networks of protection, don't just think about your women human rights defenders, or but also, are there individual police officers or local government officials, good ones I'm talking obviously, or churches that would be more inclined to help protect you? And it's not that as blanket groups that they will, but you may be able to find the odd person who is kind of a good person to have on your side from a hostile environment. So I think that's and that's not to take away from the responsibility that the state is obligated to protect you. But we know their failure. You've all talked about impunity. Like, since the mandate started 20 years ago, the issue of impunity and bringing perpetrators to justice has been cited more than 30 times in the recommendations in reports. That's huge, you know. I also think with women human rights defenders, a holistic and collective approach is good, because it's, as you know, I've taken loads of notes here. It's about attacking the integrity of your body as well. Making you, as I think it was Rosalie said, you know, just a sexual object and not basically seen as an individual of dignity. So I do think that it is important when you're building the networks to build in a kind of psychosocial outlet for yourselves that will help with your protection, so that when things get really tough, you'll have some way of supporting or being supported if that is what you need. And of course, local protection mechanisms and local protection designed by defenders themselves is the best way to try and increase your protection. And also to, like, you know, there's a lot of human rights organizations that are really not very human rights friendly, I think. And particularly when it comes to women and LGBTI and Black and human rights defenders, they're excluded from hierarchical positions, and they are less in an organization, and they aren't properly embraced as equal. And you particularly see it, I think I have seen it anyway, with both women and LGBTI human rights defenders who aren't mainstreamed properly into the work of the organization, and also into the support that they should be getting. So I think they would be just the kind of comments that I have built up, you know. I was very interested in, you know, sorry, I have to go over my Aniel. Yeah, Aniel. You know, what you were saying about women who stood for election. That's new to me, that they were, you know, as candidates, they were so attacked and humiliated and persecuted. And I was also very interested in what you said, Rosalie, about, you know, you don't want to be seen as just Indigenous women. You want to be seen, yes, as an Indigenous woman, but with the rights of any woman, and the right to dignity as a woman. So you're not being siloed into a specific area. And then I would, if anyone has any information on women with disabilities who are human rights defenders, I would like to get that, because that's an area that I want to try and develop some work on. And there's very little out there. And I have come across very few human rights defenders who are have disabilities, who are working for the rights of the disabled. But I encourage you to, you know, send cases to the inbox, so that I can, and I am talking to governments. I mean, I am, the way it works is you have to go through the mission in Geneva. So I'm picking them off one by one. And I have spoken, for example, to the Colombian permanent mission, and also the vice president, the woman vice president in Colombia, about killings. And also I have spoken to a Mexican. And so I'm making my way through different countries in order to try and influence in a small way. I see myself as a bridge between defenders and trying to give their information to governments, and trying to persuade governments to act to protect human rights defenders and see them as allies and recognize them publicly, and have that political will that somebody said is missing. So I leave it at that, and I'll put on my listening ear again.
Thank you so much, Mary. Muchas gracias, Mary, por tus comentarios y por tu
Thank you so much, Mary, for your comments. I'm going to pass the floor to Elida for the second part of our presentation here, and we are going to talk about the prevention of those violences. And also, we are going to listen to Maria Noel, and she's going to call for action for an whole protection for we need to strengthen the the local institutions. and also the recognizing of the politic will of those states and also to have better budgets and to strengthen those institutions. And like all of our panelists said, from the intersectionality and also with the relationship with their territories and the different spheres that they are living. Also, everyone, and also the defenders that have less access of those spaces. So we need to build those bridges. This is why it's so important, this building of those bridges. Thank you so much, Mary. Now I'll pass the floor to
Thank you
Elida.
so much, Andrea. Thank you so much for all those who participated in our first round. Our idea with this event is create an opportunity to exchange experiences and to get to know there are trends of human rights violations of human rights defenders. There are general, there are global, the misinformation campaigns, the attack anti-rights, which have been targeting women human rights defenders. And also there are specific attacks such as she said regarding the diversity of women. So there goes our efforts to think about the work of human rights through a full approach which embraces territories. What Aniele talked about regarding the importance of discussing racism, these are elements that are vary because there are diverse women who are working and suffering retaliation because of it. So one of the things that Mary brings to us in her report, which she recently presented to the Human Rights Council, is a group of recommendations and international recommendations and obligations, which are related to creating policies. The states should think about monitoring. The states have to think about resources available to human rights institutions to monitor the violations, the opening for the creation of international experts to make this monitoring and investigate human rights violations. And such as Manuel has talked in the beginning, women are developing these through their solidarity networks to maintain alive, to be kept alive. So this is our discussion now. We need to listen to the defenders about what they've been discussing, the proposals to protect themselves that they're developing, what they've been discussing about the state's duties, what they've been elaborating on their local networks of protection as alternatives to be kept alive. This round we're going to enter, we're going to discuss a little bit about this. The same methodology is applied. We're going to listen to the defenders and to the special rapporteur, and I'd like to begin by passing the floor to Aniele. Thank you so much, Elida. From these commendations that were already organized in the Special Rapporteur's report on the killings of human rights defenders, I think it is worth highlighting and also articulate the the combat articulation in Brazil. First, I believe that we need to acknowledge that full protection of these women is not guaranteed in any program in the Brazilian state. The program for protection of human rights defenders in Brazil is not enough to protect these women. We need we need to guarantee human rights are constantly being attacked during the whole Bolsonaro's government, which started in 2018. We need to, they reduce their budget, which caused process of inefficiencies in the protection policies in many sectors, and many states don't have these protection, and there is no specific protocol for the representatives. Political parties, they need to advance a lot to guarantee these responses. They have the obligation to follow the defenders. Debates, political resources are necessary for us to not have new Marielles here in Brazil or somewhere else in the world. Such these black women activists for human rights, they need to have specific psychological and financial conditions for their trajectory in human rights and for politics in the Brazilian scenario. We need to ensure an adequate scenario for these defenders who work jointly with the reportership in the communication with the Brazilian state, asking for a diagnostic for the existing mechanisms. I believe that we need to advance in the international complaint and obligation because this may put these women in highlight in the international scenario. We need public investments and policies aimed at this public. We are getting close to the reportership. I think that the creation of inquiry commissions and other similar mechanisms between the Brazilian state, organizations, human rights movements will accelerate the protection. This is a kind of solution. The role of the High Commissioner is very important. The production, the visiting of the state is very important. The production of reports about these recurring violences in the Brazilian scenario is a short and medium range solution that may entail modifications in the structure. Thank you, Aniele. You have 2 minutes more. I don't know if you'd like to react to Mary's question regarding the violence about if you'd like to use these 2 minutes to react to that. Yes, I can. I think, Special Rapporteur, this is a thing that we are debating a lot in Brazil very strongly because I see from two sides. First, as a family member of Marielle, we also see through the rational side. When last year we had Marielle Franco agenda, we had a lot of women, a lot of black women who have put themselves available for this power space, and we see how 1 month later, how it was to dispute these power places and being threatened and subject to many kinds of violence was very terrifying. So to everyone watching us and to our colleagues, I believe that we need to act. We still need to find the best manner so that we won't have new Marielles in the future. I said also in our last meeting how myself I'm being threatened for being in the head in front of the Marielle Franco Institute and for being her sister. So I hope that we'll have the strength to do something. We really need concrete actions, colleagues, because I believe we need to run against time. We are facing a lot of hatred because of this fascist government that we have today. So I hug our colleagues here present, and we need to talk about how we cannot have new Marielles. I think that's it. Thank you so much, Aniele, and thank you for calling the attention to the importance of the fact that what unites you and your sisters and the experience of Black women is racism, is hatred, and the fact that you've put your body available to a daily fight for human rights. So I'd like to say for all those listening to us, this is the opportunity to ask questions, to interact, to so the next round is going to be for this. So if you want to make a question, just comment on the chat. And I'd like to pass the floor to Sonia regarding protection and proposals. Sonia, it's you.
Thank you so much. Yes, I'm sharing the same ideas as Aniele. I think a few of the proposals to promote the prevention. In the case of Guatemala, we were working the policies to improve the protection of the defenders, human rights defenders, and then they stopped when the state of Guatemala had to recognize that we have a problem, that they have a problem, and that problem is called criminalization. And I think part of the prevention is that the institutions need to be recognized, that there is a criminalization, and that everything comes from that. It's not to attack the institutions, but they need to recognize everything that's wrong. And if they only say with their voice, but they don't act. They need to act differently. When in concrete, the only thing that we are living differently is to follow a system that's operating with full impunity and corruption. And another proposal is that for them to follow the same line of process of work. How this is so nice to hear how we would have to articulate with the different offices here from Geneva and nationally and locally. And of course, it's so nice to listen that we are going to work together to keep following our rights, and also the right to defend rights. And when we really need to feel recognized. We need people to recognize the work that we do. We need them to recognize that we work for a reason and that we are defending women's rights, human rights in general, and we do that with a passion and a conviction, and they have a positive impact in society. And we are not trying to we are trying to defend ourselves from the hate speeches. And also another proposal that people already talked about here, yes, is the work to approach the integrality, that we need to be helped in a whole way. But we do not need speeches. We need those works to be whole as a whole, because when we talk about criminalization, we do not have that wholeness. That's when we get less support, and we do not have enough resources for a defender to leave after they are locked up. So we really need the psychological support, but all the effects that we have in the physical part also. When we talk about the defenders, women defenders, this is not working. In the case of Guatemala, we live as a situation of extreme poverty. And it is another problem that goes beyond the persecution, beyond the criminalization. We are just not being able to work because people close the doors in front of us. This is what we need. We need people to value what we do. We need to have more open spaces to get access to that work. We cannot even go and ask for a job. You are not going to work because you are a woman, you are a defendant, you are a defender, you are not going to have that opportunity. So this is what we are going through right now here in Guatemala. We are living that situation. Our families are living that situation. So it's really urgent in the framework of the prevention that they see us as subjects of right, that we have the right to speak, and we need to make decisions for ourselves. We have that right to speak. We have the right to have a voice, and we need to have that position reflected with fair trials. So it seems like this is so, it's been going on for so many years. We need to keep promoting rights in every territory. In Guatemala, women don't even know they have the right to live free from violence, and they need to know that they have the right to be free. We have to spread the word through the territories, to the communities, even more now that we are being attacked because they say that we are promoting fake rights. What are those fake rights? They say that we have a different agenda. We have this agenda where we are losing people because of those comments. And also, it is important that we are able to recognize that the defenders, the human rights defenders, we also have the right to live free of violence. And in that sense, we have to be articulated with the other mechanisms and the other strategies that are already in place to keep defending the rights to live free of violence. In the case of Guatemala, to work together with all the aspects of our lives as defenders, as human rights defenders, that we need to work together with those other processes that we live in our territories and in our communities, and also to understand that the institution in each and every country is different. We have different struggles, we have great challenges, but I know that solidarity between us has taken us far. That's why we are alive right now. Many of us are alive right now because of that. And with these circumstances, like the reporter said, we have to work in networks. Even though we do not have budget, we are being able to work together as a network. We have a problem of budgets. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Por chamar atenção também para o
So
papel
I'd also would like to call the attention to the judicial system. The judicial system has a role in the defamation of women. So we are talking about the importance of international networks with international offices of human rights. So now we're going to listen to Jessica, which is ready. Jessica.
Del informe de la relatora y me
First
parece
of all, I would like to salute the recommendations on the report that Mary said, the report that talks about to recognize the work of the defenders and their territories, because I do believe that in the region we have a problem here, and we are suffering attacks from those people who are being defended. And also this part where they talked a lot about today, which is to promote investigation and the transparency of those investigations when women defenders are killed. It is important to say that because that's an action. This is very systematic on the international level. So we need to understand how the states can guarantee those mechanisms to end that menace, to end that criminalization. And this is going to culminate in those murders. This is why we are so pleased with the recommendations that um, talks about the creation of similar mechanisms to investigate the murder of those human rights defenders. I do believe that we have an important voice with that report, and I think this is going to be important in the future, how we can have specific reports regarding those attacks and the impacts that they have. Like she said, the psychological effect and the demand of that justice. This is really important. In that sense, we do believe that it's important also to have a magnifying lens on the protection mechanisms, since that's what happens in the case of Mexico. Because of a national politics, we have a decrease, a budget decrease, and we have an increase in the violence against women. But this is going to impact in the protection of those defenders, women defenders. Now we have a lot of women defenders. They are trying to get into that mechanism, but we are not having the right answers because we don't have a budget. So we do not have a gender perspective to the implementation of measures and to have an assessment of those risks. And we need follow-up mechanisms, and we need that to allow the states to really be accountable for uh, giving those reports in the long term. And we also think it's important because now we have this pandemic. We have to have virtual missions, online missions to access those recommendations. But this situation, we do believe this is a moment of opportunity with this report that we have from the UN. And I do believe that we can have a lot of different views, and we have to have we need to have better views of those attacks, of those defenders, and how we can also access the impact that is not only going on with the work of those defenders, but also the impact of those attacks that they suffer on social media. So we do believe that in the region, we still have a lot of work to do. We had to reactivate an important mandate from the states, the gender perspective, the intersectional approach is important.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you for making this relation between the monitoring of local policies for protection. The Brazilian and the Mexican case show us that we need the monitoring and in a higher degree, and how this is not being attained, gender perspectives and dimensional perspectives, such as Rosélia brought us. So now we're going to pass the floor to Rosélia and listen to some of her proposals and considerations. Rosélia.
Thank you so much. With all my fellow sisters, I have the same ideas, and we are here really celebrating this report. We are really happy to work together, and I think it's really important to have a revision of the public policies, and it's really important to analyze the main causes and the deep causes. And we do want to have that follow-up, a more specific follow-up with everything that has to do with the territories and the visions of territories also, and the models, the economic models, that many defenders, they are defenders of women defenders, and they defend territories because we are fighting for that, because in our region, we have this social political situation, and we have different visions, and sometimes they confront our visions, and that represents a risk for us. And also, we have the situation of the patriarchy, and it is very excluding. And here in Colombia, we are suffering from that. And we would like for you to pay attention on those issues that I just talked about. But we have the implementation of any kind of process here in Colombia is very slow. So we really need help to implement those actions here. Not only, we don't want to have only pilot projects, we do want projects that are going to be implemented at the end of the day, and especially on the cities and on the territories that have a higher risks, because those are more vulnerable cities, and those are more vulnerable women. And also, we would like to insist from the states, if the recommendation to create a follow-up mechanism, but also with, we want that that a knowledge of those defenders. We want it to be, uh, uh, we want to have more resources because the state should promote and protect those rights and strengthen those organizations. So we need really to have a guarantee of the organizational processes so that we can have a stronger society, stronger women, and we can be able to fight against those risks and menaces. We have a lot of militarization in the case of Colombia, not only in Cauca, but also in our entire country. So we always have to worry about the militarization. When I say I am an indigenous woman, I am instantly say that I am going through a huge risk. So in this context, it's really important to revise implementation to prevent that. And on those prevention exercises, we really want to recognize what is already taking place. In the case of the indigenous peoples, we have been working a lot to prevent our ancestrality, the spirituality that has to do with the territory. I think this is what is keeping us alive. We have many defenders that are suffering, but the state is not assuming their protection. So who is keeping us alive is our spirituality in our territories and our ancestry. This is what keeps us harmonized. This is what keeps us doing these practices that keeps our spirits up and that save us from all those risks. And of course, this is, I'm talking about this collective way. And I recognize here that we are developing a huge experience here, because what we want to do from ourselves, for ourselves, is to awake those um, ancestry knowledges that we have, because we are losing that cultural part in our territories, also with our languages, because all the medias, they speak in Spanish. And when they speak Spanish, they demotivate the new generation to learn the ancestry languages that we as indigenous people have. We do not want to lose that knowledge. This is really cultural. And we need to have adequate spaces so that indigenous defenders or human rights defenders, that we are able to use to do collective exercises with our community, because we need those spaces. We need the right spaces. We need the right institutions to acknowledge that we have different kinds of life forms that we are fighting for, and we need to strengthen them. And we also want to revive our culture. And I would like to ask you a special attention on the implementation on different measures for women and their diversity, but on the political participation and the protection of us, of ourselves here. And finally, also would like to say, and how can we call the states and demand the public policies from the states for indigenous women? Because we do not have that right now for indigenous women. We have many different public policies right now, but we need them to see us. They only see us as vulnerable people. They don't see us as, they don't see the richness of our culture, the richness of us as indigenous women. And we really need access to justice. This is really important to us. Indigenous women or non-indigenous women, we have a problem with the access of justice. When we suffer risks and menaces, we have a lot of problems because when we go to the external ordinary justice, this doesn't work for us. And finally, women are going to give up on demanding that justice. They just give up because they know this is not going to work for them. So we do need better access to the justice system here to guarantee our rights. And this is this is important for us, for indigenous women and non-indigenous women. We need to have access to justice. And finally, we would like to invite Mary Lawlor to come in a mission here in Cauca, in Colombia, so that you can see on first hand this reality that we are living.
Sem grandes delongas, passo.
So, with no longer ado, I pass the floor to Mary to get to know a little bit more about her considerations, if she has something to add to this debate, and also a little bit of the results of the observations which brought us to the reading of your report. Mary.
I don't really have any more to say. I mean, I agree with you. It's not as if you don't know what needs to be done, or I don't know what needs to be done, but it's the doing it that's the problem, because we're up against such difficulties. But you know, I started this work in the 70s, and you know, a lot of Latin America at that time was military dictatorships, and you see that bit by bit, just human rights defenders, they don't go away, and bit by bit, justice is built, and you're doing that. It's taking a long time, and it will take a long time, and it will never be perfect, as we all know. No country is perfect, but you just have to keep persisting. And I know the risks are really awful. I have to go to another meeting now, but I was just at a meeting with women human rights defenders in Afghanistan, and they're being killed every day. So I can't really offer you any magic solution. All I can do is the one thing I have now that I didn't have when I was in an NGO is that I have more access to governments. It doesn't mean they listen to you any more than they did if you're in an NGO, but what it does mean is they feel they have to listen to you. So what I am trying to do is to be very clear about the definition of a human rights defender, be very clear about political will, be very clear about valuing and recognizing and giving credibility publicly to the work of human rights defenders, those key messages in an effort to, and then raising cases with them, in an effort to try and push the narrative forward. And also, obviously, the particular position that women human rights defenders and LGBTI defenders and ethnic minorities face. So, but that it's a long, slow work, and we're all in it together. And to be honest, you know, we just all have to keep pushing at it. Except you are the people taking the risk, and you are the people that will eventually bring about change. So I need to thank you very much, and I think, yeah, I have 2 minutes.
Obrigada, Mary, por sua disposição e também por.
Thank you so much, Mary, for your availability and for the solidarity of putting yourself available and the access that your work post allows to add to the struggle that we know that is very difficult and doesn't have a magic solution, just as you said. I'd like to thank you for the availability. And I don't know if someone else would like to bring something else to Mary. If yes, so please turn on your microphone.
Hola, yo quisiera, es que mientras estaban en las presentaciones hubo una pregunta específica para Mary
I have
que
a specific
quería
question for Mary.
aprovechar a hacerla y es,
I would like to ask now.
¿existe realmente
Is,
un debilitamiento de los
there really
mecanismos internacionales de
a
protección de
problem with
derechos
the
humanos?
mechanism, the international mechanisms of human
Si es
rights?
así, ¿qué caminos podemos hacer para
And
fortalecer?
if it is so, what paths can we do to really strengthen those mechanisms? Are they really
Fortalecerlos y
weakening
para
right now?
asegurar la vida de los
Just
defensores.
to guarantee life.
Sorry, there is a problem with mechanisms, and there isn't really much you can do because, for example, there's one person working on the human rights defenders mandate, and I'm fundraising, but I'm not allowed to do anything outside of Geneva to do with officially, you know, so it's very difficult. But I have to go. I'm really sorry. I'm speaking now in another meeting, so you'll have to forgive me. And thank you. Bye.
Obrigada, Mary. Vamos agora ouvir.
Thank you, Mary. Now we're going to listen to Pedro Vara, which is an assistant for the Regional Office of Human Rights. Pedro, do you listen to us? Are you able to speak?
Muchas gracias, Elida, y también Andrea.
Thank you so much, Elida and Andrea, for all these panels. They are so interesting. And also good morning or good afternoon to everyone that's connected here and they are watching us on this parallel event on the Human Rights Council, the 46th Human Rights Council of the UN in Latin America. I would like to thank in a special way how Terra de Direitos is doing this and the Marielle Franco Institute, because you are working together also with the indigenous of Cauca, Oaxaca Consortium in Mexico. And also I would like to thank the presence of Miss Mary Lawlor, the special reporter from UN, and all the human rights defenders, all the panels from you guys, from you girls, from Anieli, Jessica, Joseli. Of course, they are clear examples of the violence against women and the human rights defenders and leaders in Latin America. And like you said, it calls for the attention of those special situations because this is a violence concept and is a structural violence that's structuralized in the society in patriarchy systems and heteronormative structures. So this is why violence is still the main problem for the fundamental freedoms and human rights. We have an instrumentalization of violence. And at the same time, and we have been saying that during all the panelists have been saying that at the same time, this instrumentalization of violence subjectifies those women as a desirable body, just a desirable body, to silence the voices of the human rights defenders. So that's why I can see you have different possibilities to claim your rights. And I have been listening to you in this parallel event, and I just want to share a few thoughts that come from your interventions here. The special report about the situation of the human rights defenders, they define those situations as any other person independent apart from their gender or sex that work on defending the rights of women or in gender issues. So this is something important because other people that are not necessarily women, they can also enjoy a fairer society free of violence where men also can work along with this cause, because we all men can be activists and feminists to have these structural changes. And on the other hand, the women defenders, as we already know, they are subject to the same risks and the same kinds of risks that any other human rights person. But as women, they are they suffer specific gender violence, and they are particularly exposed to those violences and those threats. And for sure, like all of you have said here today, we have a different impact on the human rights that are women and are defenders. So the reasons of those attacks, they are very complex, and they depend, as you all have said, on the specific context that you work in, from your communities, your territories. And like we have listened here, this work of the women defenders, it is developed in a context of very sexist, patriarch, and heteronormative societies where we have different stereotypes, negative stereotypes that are so rooted. So effectively, women are not a group, um, hegemonic group, and we have different stereotypes. We have multiple stereotypes that has to do with race, indigenous, black, age. It doesn't matter. We have different aspects, or even disabled. We have different aspects of those people that are attacked because of their gender or gender identity that defies the heteronormative that's existent in that region, and unfortunately in the entire planet. That's why it is so important to identify those attacks. And we have to understand that specific context where they are working, all the leaders and the defenders inside their territories and communities. Their work represents a challenge to the traditional notions and roles of a society, a traditional society. And they suffer attacks from the population in general and also the authorities. So those defenders, they are object of ostracism and stigmatization from political groups, local groups, community groups, religious groups. They are considered a menace to religion, honor, and community. That's why all their work and their efforts to achieve also makes them a target for attacks. And also, their families become a target of those violences and threats. And they want those offenders to stop their work. They suffer more risks to suffer certain forms of violence. And that's why it's so hard for them, because it's worse for them than for men. This is why we need to recognize and validate those challenges to really strengthen those protection mechanisms locally and internationally. And that's why I'm going to finish right now. This has to be the main responsibility from the state. They need to give answers to those claims, and they need to promote an effective protection to really end attacks towards women because of their differences, and also to the women defenders of human rights, and also to really defend the families of those defenders. Although the situation is far away from perfect, the defenders do not have effective protection mechanisms. This is why it's so important to say that impunity, like many of you have said here, The impunity that's linked to those attacks shows us the mean message that these attacks are normalized. That's why they are tolerated. So the state needs to be accountable for there and for that. And the national protection mechanisms needs to investigate right now the threats, the menaces, the violences, and other abuses that have been taking place by state agents and non-state agents. I have a lot of proposals regarding what are the mechanisms, and I also talked about a few ideas that you talked about. We need to understand the different contexts and different groups and your different communities and territories. We need to have this approach, and we have to take into account and understand who are those those who have those rights, and we have to understand the intersection of the discrimination. So it is important to understand that those mechanisms are going to guarantee the active participation of the civil society and women's organization and activists. We need to have effective mechanisms that can have the necessary budgets to make sure they are going to protect the women that are defenders and also their families. And also we need these mechanisms to fight the impunity, and they need to operate from a whole vision to work through prevention, judgment, sanction, and another important element towards the guarantees of non-repetition. These are patterns, these are standards from the optic of the states, from our offices here, from the High Commissioner here of the UN for the Human Rights. We are going to be supporting this mandate of the rapporteur, special rapporteur, and the human rights defenders. We are going to keep working with the people's defenders of human rights, and we are going to give visibility to this issue. These violations should not be forgotten, and they should not be inside the impunity. Thank you so much. That's what I wanted to say to you. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias, Pedro, por compartirnos estos
Thank you
puntos.
so much, Pedro, for sharing these points with us. I would like to just highlight the last one is the importance of truth, justice, reparation, and the guarantees of non-repetition. We need to prevent and not heal. So I would like to open for Q&A right now. As we could see, we have a specific one for the reporter, but she really had to leave. If someone has something to say, please do so. Please, this is the moment of Q&A. How can we prevent those attacks to the defenders, and especially women defenders, and also prevent those side effects of repression, anxiety, panic syndrome? And the other one is, what can we do as Latin America? What can we do as a whole, as Latin America? And something else that's really pertinent that I think is important, and it has to do with the first one. If the organizations have documented psychosocial impacts of the systematic violence that those defenders go through, and if you have good practices to develop, focusing that they could be considered torture. I would like to pass the floor to the defenders now. Now, I would like to really ask you to be really, really straight on your answers and answer really rapidly, because we do not have a lot of time right now. So you can turn your mics or raise your hand. Hello. Yes, I would like to strengthen those mechanisms to go through the collective systems of the defenders. Because if we are not recognized, there's no way we can dialogue with anyone. We need to have a better dialogue. So uh, what we need to really understand is we have to be recognized locally. And when we talk about those psychosocial impacts, I think they are really strong and they are not very visible and measurable because we cannot show them, but I do know that we have impacts in collective contexts, and it takes to feminicides, and we have been having a lot of feminicides. And every time women raise their voices, they call more attention and they suffer more risks. And we really want to think about the social impacts. We have a lot of depression, we have a lot of suicidal thoughts, and also we have sometimes we do not want to participate in other spaces. That's why many of us have given up. We have a problem when we think about the indigenous women. Um, when we have to work together through our territories, because we see that this is weakening, and we have seen how many different diseases like stress, we have a lot of problems. I do not know one defender that does not have some kind of problem or stress, and how they have we also have problems with the protection of our families. They are facing those risks to lose everything. Although they want to work for everyone, they end up losing their family. They end up losing themselves because they do not have time to take care of themselves. So we need to have that. They end up abandoning their own selves. And also it has to do with the social and emotional impacts, where we are denied the right to be a woman, and we are denied the right to be indigenous. So this is what's happening. We need to improve our local relationships. It also has a deep impact on the collective emotion of what it means to be an indigenous people. And of course, we need to work as a network, and we need to keep sharing, because this is what makes us move forward as indigenous people, as indigenous women. And that's why we want to keep protecting our territory and harmonizing our territory. And that's why it's so important also to be recognized. The territory is also a victim, and that's why the feminist territory, we can see how the feminist bread gaps are the most affected ones, and that's why it has an impact not only with indigenous people, but also with an entire society that is living right now, because this is something structural. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Roseli, for your approach and to show us your reality of the relationship you have with your land and your territory. Anyone else would like to say something? Would you like, Jessica? Yes, sure. Because I think an important part of this exercise is the political will of the state, or from the states. What Mary said about not only people to listen, but we need to have this window of opportunities open. And we have this worry of the militarization as a response of the human rights movements. Many countries in the region have this problem with the militarization. And also something else that I would like to say is that, like what said Joseli said, it is important to keep moving on the building of those networks. We need to build those networks. We need to build the exchange of experiences. We still have a lot to learn from everything that surrounds the collective protection, the feminist, the self-care, self-protection, to have this feminist approach on the protection of those women defenders. And I think an important part also is how the diplomatic body can also work on this assessment of the actions of the states. We have states that are in crisis. Sometimes they are not militarized states. I think we are suffering a regional crisis when we talk about the impunity of the feminicides of those offenders. This is really unfortunate that we have seen this impunity for 20, 15 years, and now we have this challenge of how can we make that pressure so that the judicial power can help us end that impunity. And we have this culture of allowness. And this is how the impunity has generated people to feel entitled to attack those leaders, women leaders, and how they impact the participation of women in political positions here in Mexico. This is what's happening right now. Thank you so much, Jessica, for talking about this impunity point, Sonia. Yes, I would like to comment what my sisters have said, but to prevent, we need to keep talking. We need to keep sharing what's necessary. We need to keep defending rights. I think it's important to have an environment where all institution and organization are able to uh, have the right to defend rights without being afraid that this is going to lead to a feminicide, to an abuse. This is a right, and we need to keep using that right and promoting that right against the violence against women defenders of human rights, because the states need to be committed to investigate all the crimes against um, women defenders, and they need to be role models, and that any person that is criminalizing or bashing a defender, they need to be investigated. It doesn't matter who they are, but we need justice to be applied. And this exchange of experiences and what we can do here in Latin America, I do think this is an important space to work together here in Latin America so that we can work together as Latin America, exchanging knowledge, because we know that sometimes what we can learn from each other. We need to be together. We need to work together because we have less spaces. So we need to end those boundaries. We need to work really close now. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sonia, for your message. We do need to work together. This is the key word. We do need to work together. Joseli, Aniele, would you like to say something, Aniele? Or can we close? Aniele, would you like to say something? Aniele, would you like to say something, Aniele?
Posso rápido?
Can I speak quickly? Okay, so I think that's it. I think being together is very important. I think it is also important to highlight that this event has the first step of mobilization strategies and incidents, and also focusing on caring and activism in the region of Americas, just as Rosalie and Jessica told us about. I think they have the mental impact, and they also suffer. We believe that there is this connection between political violence and their dynamics, which affect the many ways in which defenders and feminist leaderships act in Latin America. So I think we need to look at this with a broadening view, and also tools for us to keep acting on this local context. I think our goal now is to advance so that measures be adopted by states so that they have accountability, and also we keep following up on cases of violence against transsexual Black Indigenous women so that we may be able to respond to these women and their families. So, colleagues, about the case of my sister, I'd like to suggest the reportership, and also, since she has already left, to Pedro, a creation of an international task force to monitor and pressure the state regarding Marielle's case, and also reinforce the importance of this reportership and suggest a working in partnership with other reporterships, the special reportership on executive, but also other human rights defenders in all and every region in Latin America. So I think that to finish, the government's pressure is essential to guarantee the protection of human rights defenders, transsexual women, and transsexual women who are living on death threats. International action, organized international action may help to articulate public policies seeking to stop the of transsexual, travesti, and Black women in these institutional politics of human rights fight in general. So I'd like to thank a lot for the space once again, and thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Aniel, for your words. And now I pass the floor to Alma Perez. She is a coordinator of the regional offices of Panama for the UN. And then after Alma, we are going to close the event. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Andrea. Can you hear me? Thank you really much to all of you, not only for today, but for the work, your daily work on your communities, because that's where we make things right. And that's where we are suffering. That's when we are in danger. I would like to talk about three key elements that you have talked about today, which is the networks. The networks, they save lives. I'm sure this is going to contribute the protection of those women in regions that are of hard access. They have a problem with access from those remote regions. So this is so important for us. I think this is a fundamental part to move on. This is the first one. The second one is this network, those mechanisms, the protection mechanisms cannot come along. They cannot come alone. We cannot keep talking about protection and not uh, make a pressure on the obligations of the state. The state needs to be accountable for, they need to be accountable for the actions with those actions of the defenders, but particularly in the concrete transformation of the normative frameworks that are here in Latin America and on the concrete realities of these women. We need to demand that the normative elements, the tools that we have, the mechanisms that we have, they are took place here. So the third element is the voice and the work of the rapporteur. Of course we have a voice, but we have to open those spaces and have a coherence to receive that message and act according to it. This is why This is key and fundamental to everyone that's here listening. We all have a defender next to us in our house, in our home, in our neighborhood, in our school, in the university, on our works. So we need to open the spaces to those defenders. I understand the idea to work defenders, male and female defenders, but like all the historic discriminations that women suffer, we need to understand that when we lose a female defender, we lose a piece of our community. So we have to open spaces to their voices. We need to protect them on our daily lives while we are moving on with the demands for our rights and strengthening the spaces of articulation that are so important right now. Thank you so much, Andrea, for your space. Thank you so much. And homage to the defenders that are here. And we keep celebrating them, the ones who are not here. We shouldn't be celebrating their deaths. We should be celebrating their lives.
Obrigada, Alma. Obrigada por essa. Obrigada por essa
Thank you,
fala.
Alma. Thank you for this speech with a lot of coherence and also commitment. It's very good to listen to this. I like to, in the name of the organizations that have proposed this event, Terra de Direitos, Marielle Franco Institute, and Global Justice, I'd like to thank the people who work directly with the event, José Lucas, Maíra, Camila, Bruna, Pedro. Thank the translators, Louisiana and Rafael, and also finish with this idea that they've all talked about, that the environment is not enabling. It's very damaging to women human rights defenders in many cases. We have a lot to do, but we can do it together. So that's the main message of this event. So thank you so much. And we finish here.
Tchau.
Chao.